Alright everyone, it's time for the Occult, video number 282. There is no such thing as Neopaganism. I promised that I would make this video the other day. Here's the thing. Paganism is not necessarily the most meaningful term to begin with. I can pick that apart separately as well. But when people say like I'm a neo-pagan, usually what they mean is that they're a hippie. It's basically religion for the Hot Topic generation. I got a Thor's hammer made in China, and I kind of like this folk metal band, and so I must be an Odinist now. Now that's the other problem with the term pagan in general. But pagan is an authentic term. Usually, if it's in U.S. or Europe parlance, you're talking about Norse paganism. People who follow more like the Greek or Roman style of paganism tend to use the term Hellenist or something akin to it. If they follow Egyptian paganism, I'm not sure they necessarily use the term pagan. So I'm a devotee of Amon-Ra or something. And of course, technically the term pagan also encompasses, it tends to be used if it's outside of the mainstream of the current Judeo-Christian religion that happens to be dominant in your area. Hinduism is kind of sort of a pagan way as well. And of course you have a million sub-schools. The problem with using the term pagan in and of itself at all is that it doesn't necessarily have any larger meaning. It means I'm spiritual without being a Jew, a Christian, or a Muslim, essentially, if it's used by people in America. That tends to be the common usage. Well, it doesn't tell you anything meaningful. There's 1,000 different variants of paganism, even among those groups, as I've explained prior. Let's say you believe in the Greek religious system. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that your kind of worship is the same as someone else that does, because you might be specifically devoted to the rites of Dionysos, and they might be an adherent of Aphrodite or something like that. Essentially, they're kind of different religions. Literally, the term would be cult. And I don't mean cult in the pejorative sense that it tends to be used, but more like a sect or something. But neo-paganism, when it deviates from those systems in their initial historical sense, is basically just fucking horseshit. Now, this doesn't mean that I have a problem with it to any moral extent. Worship however you want. But if your conceptualization is wildly different from the conceptualization of that same pagan system that was made in the first place, well, basically you're just a heretic at that point. That would be like being a devil worshiper. Basically, you're saying, well, yeah, the Christian God exists. I just choose to worship the other dude or something. You'd be a pagan heretical devil worshiper at some point because of your deviation from the traditional system. And a lot of times they've been made in relative modernity. It's like the equivalent of Mormonism or the Jehovah's Witnesses. Like when we talk about Wicca. Now, I believe that especially hedge Wicca is largely positive and it's kind of cool, but it's not really an authentic traditionalistic religion as it was marketed to be. It's like if you called yourself a Christian, but you said, well, I don't believe in this Bible bullshit, I wrote my own book. Well, other Christians at some point would just roll their eyes at you. You'd be considered a heretic or maybe a false prophet or something. Neo-pagans operate basically in the same way. Again, it's the hot topic of paganism would be the neo-pagan term. If you say, for example, I pointed this out with regards to Marianne Williamson's hippie nonsense. If you're talking about pagans being like nature worshippers and stuff like that and dancing around naked in the trees and stuff, that's a very postmodern interpretation of a system that was chauvinistic, largely, explicitly, extremely warlike, extremely violent, in which animals were slaughtered and their entrails used for divinatory purposes, and things like that. It's sort of like saying that you're religious but then not believing in any of the sort of supernatural aspects of your religion. Like I've talked with Christians, of course, and you'll meet a Christian, they're like, well, you're talking about all this weird occult bullshit, and it's like, well, you do realize that there's witchcraft and sorcery and demons and all of this stuff in the Bible. It's doctrinal, it's canonical. You've divorced your religion of all the supernatural content that has been in your now modern so-called scientific mind disproven in order to reconcile your worldview, essentially, in order to not lose your faith. And so you've made it a scientific religion. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense if you actually read it and take it seriously. If you believe that God exists, then you can hang the fucking science. As far as paganism goes, I've met some people who claim to be pagan, online of course, and their conceptualization of that pagan system is listening to folk metal. That's how they worship Odin. They don't even, they've never read the Eddas or anything like that. They don't even have a clue about the fucking religion beyond, well, Thor's kind of cool. He hits people with a hammer. Marvel told me so, or DC, or whichever friggin' company does that shit. Thor hits people with a hammer, and he's strong, and I kind of identify with that. You know, even though I'm a streamer, and I'm 300 pounds, and I drink nothing but Gatorade all day, but I'm basically like Thor, because one of my ancestors was from Sweden, and so I'm a neo-pagan now. That's basically how a lot of them operate. This is increasingly common in every religion, though. I mean, have you ever seen, and it's on YouTube, and live streams 24/7, if you look at, like, India TV or something like that, you see all of these religious programs, and then you'll see, like, an advertisement for a Hanuman statue or something. a little plastic Hanuman statue, or a Ganesha bust or something like that with miracle tea that's supposed to bring you closer to Shiva or some shit. And it's the overt consumerist side of religion, the corruption of religion, a traditionalist would deem it. I see this among pagans too. Like here, I got my Book of Shadows off of Amazon. Here's my, made in Bangladesh, of course, my Thor's hammer necklace on a little plastic string. Well, that's not really paganism. What you're talking about deviates extremely from anything that your so-called pagan ancestors would have possibly done as a form of worship or spirituality. If you want to go down the nature spirit and stuff route, you should just become a general occultist and study all of these different great religions and spiritualities. They're very interesting. Some of it's utter bullshit. Some of it's total hogwash. And some of it, maybe not so. But yeah, neo-paganism, it doesn't even exist really. Just say that you're you want to be edgy. You don't really believe probably even in like the pantheon or anything from that religious backdrop. Like you're like, well, I'm a Hellenist. No, I don't really believe that Zeus is up there. I don't really believe that Artemis is running around with dryads and sylphs and shit in the woods. But I'm religious, just like my Greek ancestors. Well, no, not particularly. Go in and worship in nature or something all you want, or have bonfires and orgies and stuff. I mean, it's fun. The rites of Bacchus or whatever. That's very, very entertaining, but it's not an authentic spirituality. It's basically been twisted by materialism into a consumer sport, if you could term it like that. That's about all. Peace out.